Hello, I'm very glad to be joining this Wind Energy Ireland conference. I want to focus, if I can, first on the potential for offshore energy in our country. Due to our location on the edge of the Atlantic with a sea area of 490,000 square kilometres, which is almost 7 times our landmass, we have considerable, but as yet undeveloped offshore renewable potential. As technologies develop, Ireland has the resource potential to become a major contributor in a pan-European renewable energy and transmission system change. The programme for government commits Ireland to achieving 70% renewable electricity by 2030, including 5 gigawatts of installed offshore wind, and has long-term plans to take advantage of the estimated 30 gigawatts of floating wind power resources that are out there. Together with the forthcoming Maritime Area Planning Bill, the National Marine Planning Framework will be a key enabler to allow Ireland to achieve its climate goals and deliver a reliable supply of safe, secure and clean energy and thus phase out fossil fuels. Enactment of the Marine Area Planning Bill will provide the legislative underpinning to allow us to move in a phased manner from the current decentralised regime towards a more centralised, plan-led regime for offshore wind, in line with the frameworks established under marine spatial planning. The Marine Area Planning Bill was published in August. Development of the bill has been led by the Minister for Housing, Local Government and Heritage, and my department is also helping the development of provisions specific to offshore renewable energy. Enactment of the bill will provide a modern, efficient and House compliant regulatory and marine planning framework for ORE developments beyond the limit of the foreshore 12 nautical miles. The bill provides flexibility in terms of the extent of the state's involvement in deploying ORE in Irish waters, allowing for a gradual transition from the current more decentralised regime, as I've said, towards a more centralised plan-led regime, with state involvement in spatial planning and grid development increasing over the decade. Work on the development and future operation of a new consenting regime for offshore renewable energy is underway within my department, within this work. This regime will aim to provide clarity and consistency for applicants, attract investment, remove unnecessary duplication, and ensure ORE projects are in line with state environment and marine spatial planning policies. The bill will also establish a new agency to regulate development of the maritime area, the Maritime Area Regulatory Authority, MARA. MARA's functions will include assessing and granting all maritime area consents, also granting licences for a number of activities in the maritime area, including environmental surveys. It will have to ensure robust compliance through enforcement measures and manage the existing state foreshore portfolio of leases and licences. The MAC consents for substantially advanced legacy projects, those designated as relevant projects, will be assessed and, if appropriate, granted by the Minister for Environment, Climate and Communications. It's recognised that the additional projects will need to progress to meet our 2030 targets. As technology progresses and subject to the relevant requirements under the new consenting regime being met, these may include floating offshore wind developments. The development of objective criteria to enable the most viable projects to proceed through the new planning regime is now underway. This will include assessment of capability to connect to the grid. A new government framework for Ireland's future offshore electricity transmission system will provide for the future development, operation and ownership of Ireland's offshore electricity transmission system. The offshore grid framework envisages a phased transition from a decentralised to a centralised model over the course of this decade. It has to take place in line with 3 scheduled offshore auctions. Under the new policy, EirGrid have been appointed as operator and asset owner of Ireland's offshore electricity transmission system, with ownership resting with EirGrid at all stages of the phased transition, regardless of whether the grid has been developed by individual renewable energy projects or by EirGrid. The enduring centralised model, with transmission system assets planned, developed, owned and operated by EirGrid, has been identified as delivering maximum societal benefits. Once the required legislation, consenting regime and offshore grid regulatory framework are in place, and when a sufficient number of projects for competitive auction have received these consents, the government will launch the first RES, offshore RES, and this will be first in a series of dedicated offshore auctions to be designated to achieve our 2030 targets and beyond. This week, my department published for consultation the draft terms and conditions of this ORS 1. My officials and I look forward to the feedback from this audience to that consultation ahead of finalising the terms and conditions early next year. The actions we are taking now and the further actions to be announced in the 2021 Climate Action Plan will set us on the path to at least a 70% renewable electricity target and to increased electrification of our end-use sectors to 2030 and ultimately towards our national climate objective of net zero by 2050. Political support for enhanced electricity connection as a means of driving transition of a low-carbon energy future is reflected in the Climate Action Plan and the 2020 Programme for Government. In addition to the East-West Interconnector, there are two further interconnection projects in development, which will connect Ireland to our neighbours, the Celtic Interconnector to France and the Greenland Interconnector to the UK, both of which have benefited from EU grant funding. The Celtic Interconnector is a proposed 700 megawatt electricity interconnector between Brittany and East Cork, promoted and developed by the Irish electricity transmission system operator EirGrid and its French counterpart RTE. Upon scheduled completion in 2026, it will represent Ireland's largest electricity interconnector. As an EU project of common interest, the Celtic Interconnector was awarded a €530 million grant under the Connecting Europe facility in 2019, which will cover approximately half of the project's total estimated costs. The North Sea's Energy Cooperation will continue to support the development of the offshore grid and the large renewable energy potential in our region, and the attainment of ambitious offshore renewable energy targets. The European Green Deal and EU Offshore Renewable Energy Strategy both emphasise the importance of this offshore renewable energy in meeting the EU's 2030 and 2050 climate targets, and also our energy objectives, which highlight the importance of regional cooperation. Development of offshore renewable energy within the North Sea's Energy Cooperation Forum will also be provided through a revision of the Forum's founding political declaration in 2021 to reflect the increased energy and climate ambition in the new European Green Deal. Close further cooperation between the EU and non-EU countries within the North Seas region will be necessary to facilitate faster development of offshore renewables and more effective decarbonisation of EU power generation. Negotiations will shortly commence between the EU and UK regarding the establishment of a Memorandum of Understanding for future offshore renewable energy cooperation in the North Sea region. Ireland's increased climate ambitions will entail investment of tens of billions of euro in offshore renewables. This investment will deliver high-value indigenous jobs related to the installation and maintenance of generation assets and associated infrastructure and services, and the development of indigenous supply chain and port infrastructure. The significant role for ports and the need for associated infrastructure development in Irish ORE development is well recognised. A cross-department offshore renewable energy top team, chaired by my department, is being established to capture the wider economic and business opportunities associated with the development of this resource. This will include the identification of supporting infrastructure development and supply chain opportunities as Ireland's offshore wind industry is developed. The OREDP, published in February 2014, identifies opportunities for sustainable development of offshore renewables based on analysis of those offshore resources. It aims to increase indigenous production of renewable electricity, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ensure security of electricity supply and create jobs in the green economy. Work is underway in developing Ireland's second OREDP, outlining updating the original plans. This analysis is intended to aid the phased transition of a planned-led system. That is what we are engaged in, major system change, where renewable power, and particularly offshore renewable power, gives us the security and the clean economy of the future that we want. I thank you for your work in that regard. I look forward to working with you as we deliver on all these commitments and making renewable energy the centre of our climate and energy transition. Thank you.